Okay. Okay, so welcome to this Saturday special edition of the Sankofa African interview, right? My name is Benjamin Akwe. It's 5 p.m. US Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time. Those who are in the West African region of Africa I think, is somewhere around 9 p.m. And those on the East Coast is almost like 12 a.m. To our viewers, Sankofa African Review is organized by Bell and Associate Consulting Limited. And what we do at Bell and Associate Consulting Limited is try to bridge the gap between the African diaspora and the African continent, and to find the nexus between US policy and African policy. Those of you who are interested in supporting the program, you can go to Bell and Associate Consulting Limited.com, BELLANDASSOCIATE. Today's program is quite unique. It is a follow-up to Sankofa program that we had yesterday, May 16, 2025, was Friday. We had the former Assistant Secretary for Bureau of African Affairs, Whitney Schneiderman, who was the Assistant Secretary from 1997 to 2001. So he wrote a fascinating article about how African countries can negotiate with the Trump administration with respect to critical mineral resources. Right. But before I introduce our guest for today, let me take the opportunity to thank Honorable Schneiderman, who joined yesterday to discuss critical mineral resources negotiating with the Trump administration. Today, we are continuing our discussion by focusing on African critical mineral resources. But this time, we are looking at investment and challenges in the energy sector. Our guest today is Honorable, I hope I'll get the name correct, Duan Chow. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Okay, Duan Chow. Okay, let me formally welcome to you to the Sankofa African Review. Right, so let me get you, for those of you who are listening for the first time, I'm giving you a brief profile. Duan Chow was born in Ho Chi Minh City, which is formerly Saigon, Vietnam. After the war ended, he and his family fled Vietnam, political refugees, and arrived in the...
I cannot hear you.
So get
close to the mic, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So he and his family fled Vietnam as political refugees and arrived in the United States in 1976. At the outset of his career, Mr. Chow played a key role in the presidential campaigns and White House administration of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Walker Bush as the first Bush. His distinguished appointments included serving as campaign policy coordinator, a member of the White House domestic policy staff, and a special assistant to Secretary Richard Schwartz at the Department of Health and Human Services, where he focused on the refugee resettlement program. In the private sector, Mr. Chow has served as a senior advisor to major American corporations, including Bechtel Marathon Oil, Parcon Seaboard, Packard Bell, and Cisco Network. Mr. Chow is a graduate of Institute of Studies of Politics in Paris, France, where he studied political science and international relations. He's fluent in Vietnamese, French, and Tao. So you are welcome again to our Sankofa African program. Now, to start on a lighter note, let's start on a very lighter note, right? So you wrote an opinion piece, which you shared on LinkedIn, titled, "Why African Waits While Vietnam Builds? A Hard Look at Kenya." You posted this thing on LinkedIn. And I frequent LinkedIn a lot, and I read a lot of articles, right? Now, this was as a result of your visit to Kenya, where you met with Prime Minister Secretary Musalia Mudavadi and President Ruto in March. Now, before we get into the details of the articles, right, I want you to tell our guests, right, what actually inspired you to write that particular article.
So we just hello, gentlemen. I would like to say hello to our guest too over there, Frederick. Excel and Dumi Sani Como. And I have a brief exchange with Benjamin about how I write this article, because I mentioned to him when I have a fascination about Africa. I remember when I was in my high school, I I used to read a lot of information about Africa. I watched movie, and at that time they have a movie series they call Mondo Khan. Mondo Khan is like, at that time we don't have a technology, so they make movie about travel. In that, I see Nairobi. They're talking more about Nairobi nightlife. They have nightclub. They have all the high rise building, very nice. Uh, so when I came to Kenya recently, I was surprised that Kenya stayed the same since the 70s. I saw all those buildings, all the high rise building there, and I said, well, when I saw the movie, I saw this building in the 70s. But when Vietnam had only one high rise building, one high rise building is a bank building. It built in 1970, 72 or something like that. The only one. But when I came to Kenya, I see several ones. But the surprise is why Kenya stopped building. It's frozen in time. And I stay in the downtown of Nairobi at the one of the 5-star hotel is so called. They call it the Stanley Sarova, and that's hotel near the State House. That's why we stay there. But the downtown of Nairobi is completely light. It's nothing there. It looked like it's abandoned. It's not, but it looked like abandoned. So that's the reason why when I have a discussion with the policymaker, with people in Kenya, I ask them, could you explain me why there's no progress in the 70s? They say, no, it's going. I say, yeah, in order for you to do economic development or do any change for your country, the first thing you do is you need to have enough energy, right? Kenya.
Hold on for a second. We'll get into the details of
Yes.
your opinion, but
Right.
let me follow up. We'll get to the details of it. Right.
Right.
What was your frame of reference? Were you comparing Kenya to Vietnam? At the same time, at the back of your mind, you have the U.S. also in the back, because you live in the U.S., right? So that is where you've lived throughout. So you see what happens in the U.S. So was it a comparison with U.S., Vietnam at the same time, with Kenya at the same time, or you were just looking at Kenya vis-a-vis Vietnam without any bias in terms of where you come from in the United States?
Completely. Let me explain you why. When I was in a meeting with the President Ruto, I'm not the only one. They have other delegation, and I was surprised that some Kenyan guests asked the president to give him land concession for growing sugarcane. He won like 150,000 acres of land for sugarcane. I wondered, how can Kenya be progress by growing sugarcane, right? And so I that's the reason why I talked to the meeting. I said, right now we need to focus in export. We need to provide job. We need to have enough energy. We need economy development. That's how we need to employ people, because the people is your asset, not everything else. But nobody really pay attention to it. After that, we go have take picture. But then one of the staff is a chief of staff of Mudavadi go after me. He asked me, "Can I meet with you later on?" I said, "Of course, we should meet." And then that evening we have a drink and we talk about that. Yeah. And that's the core reason why. And I told him this, why Vietnam? I say, I also work as a consultant. I help to build energy like LNG or power plants in 1995. And I told you, I look at similarity. I think you don't need to invent anything because Vietnam is is a blueprint. You almost a photocopy. Anything Vietnam done, the mistake, the success, you can use that and can do it tomorrow. I can bring the Vietnamese business invest in Kenya like a photocopy machine. You just copy the blueprint and you can adapt to yourself very quickly. Don't need to invent anything. That's the reason
Okay.
why Vietnam and Kenya.
All right. We'll come to Vietnam, its
By the way,
industrialization.
I'm a
Go ahead.
Vietnamese, but I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm
Correct.
not a
Correct.
Vietnamese citizen. Yeah.
Okay. So now we'll come to Vietnamese industrial development and the energy sector, right? But let's stick on
Yeah.
with your article. Now, I reach out to a member of the UDA party. The UDA party is the governing party in Kenya right now. The
Right.
president's party is the UDA. So I sent him your article, and this is what he said. Very valid. When he read your article, he said very valid. Now let me read some of the excerpts of your article for you to comment on that. You said,
Yes, sir.
give me a second. Yeah, you said what? Kenya's real problem is not a lack of money or talent. It is the absence of long-term vision and the dominance of short-term gain. Leaders talk big, but systems don't move. What do you mean by that?
Because I have, like I mentioned to you after I've discussed with them, is is and after that I did engage with some business between Vietnam and Kenya too. It seemed to be there is no in Vietnam when we do something right. We need to have a master plan. We need to do like in order to attract investment. We ask the FDI to invest in Vietnam. The first thing for them to invest in Vietnam is you need to provide them with a plan. You don't ask them, please come and give me your plan, right? That's what the attitude in Kenya is. Okay, that's the land over there. Why don't you just come in and give me your plan? How do you develop that plan? That's why it all go wrong because the guy who bring in the plan is his plan, not Kenya plan. You know, you must have a master plan and say, look, this is my plan. This is how I want you to develop based on this plan. That's how Vietnam do. The Communist Party is it may be the only party, but they have a master plan. They have a 5-year plan. They have a 10-year plan, and they're okay. This area is for energy. This area is for industrial zone, that kind of thing. So people know when they come to Vietnam and how they want to do it. I don't think Kenya has that. Even housing, no. They just say, okay, that's the land. Just come and build a house there. Well, in order to build a house, you need to build a road. You need to have the plan, not build a house in chaos.
All right. Let's get. We are still on the article. You say
right.
They wait for outsiders to bring business rather than build an environment for it. The biggest indicator, electricity. Vietnam, 100 million people, over 70 gigawatts of power. Kenya, 50 million people, only 4 gigawatts of power. This is not a side issue. It is the foundation of economic development. No investor will build a factory where the lights flicker every day. When you say they wait for outsiders to bring business, right? Outsiders coming is foreign direct investment. We'll go to what happened in Vietnam. Outsiders are foreign direct investment. So why is that a problem in the case of Kenya? Because we've seen that in Vietnam. We'll come to Vietnam. Why is waiting for outsiders to come? Why is that a problem in the case of Kenya?
Because how do you ask me to invest in manufacturing in Kenya and there's no electricity there? How do you expect I invest in Kenya and also have to build power plant for you? Right? In Vietnam, they do differently. They invest, the government invests to build power plant. Then they even subsidize the cost electricity like an incentive for you to invest in Vietnam. They even build industrial zone, special economic zone to attract with tax incentive for you to come to invest in Vietnam. That's how people come to invest. Not, I mean, there's sensitive thing to say publicly, But like in Kenya, it's more like you not only you come to invest in Kenya, but they also ask you have to pay me in order for you to invest in Kenya.
All right, let's continue. You said there is nothing for visitors to experience or spend on beyond a Maasai market. That's essentially a souvenir stand. President Ruto wants to build public housing, but investors are scared of by petty corruption and legal instability. There are no credible investors, no serious risk guarantees. In short, no incentive to make it happen. Compare this to Vietnam or Singapore. Right. So you said what? The investors are scared by petty corruption and legal instability. Can you explain that?
Well, I can explain that, but I don't know should I say it. But the point is, talking about Masai Mara,
Correct.
Masai market there. I spent like 2 weeks in Nairobi. I'm telling you, there's nothing for me to visit except the safari at Nairobi. And after 9 o'clock, everything closed. And there is nothing. And when I ask people, where is a tourist attraction, they say you should go to Masai Mara. And I go to the shopping center. It like a flea market, right? They sell souvenir. Everywhere is sell souvenir. I say, well, in Vietnam or in any Asia country, it's 24 hours. You're going to bring in billions of dollars. In Vietnam, for example, the night business, the after 9 o'clock business, or the bar, or everything like that, it bring in billion and billion dollars for Vietnam, just for tourism.
All
That's
right.
how people.
Yeah, go ahead. And you made a statement that all they do is talk and no action, right? We know that President Ruto, right, last year visited the United States where he had a red carpet, right? Then he visited Germany. So he's visited a couple of countries, right? Isn't he doing something right? That is why he is going around doing all these things. Because if it is all talk, how come that he is visiting all these countries and getting all these reception? Just 2 weeks ago, he was there at the African Business Forum, right? Isn't he doing something? Because he must be doing something. That is why he is getting all these investors lining up to listen to him.
Right. No, I admire President Ruto. He speaks very well on behalf of Africa, right? He has a lot of great idea, but great idea doesn't bring in food for the people of Kenya. You don't just have grander idea, and then you expect everything to happen like magic, right? You want to build Africa, you need to have manpower. Your people need to be training. You need to have plan so you can realize that plan. You cannot just speak nicely and have no plan.
So basically,
I
you're
don't
saying
see any
that,
plan.
yeah, basically, you're saying that all that we do is talk, right? But there are no real plan. And even there are plans, those plans are politically motivated, right? And they are short term and long term.
Right. Because before you can walk, you should crawl first. Right now you don't need PhD in Kenya. You need vocational training. You need to train people to work. You need to put people to work, because that's how the country can get rich, by collect tax and revenue for business, for small business. Once people get employed, they got they're going to pay tax. They're going to create a new economy for Kenya. Then you're going to talk about bigger things. Because right now, any investor who came to Kenya, it's pretty depressed to me. The way I see it, there's even in a five-star hotel, they like it on and up, on and up. How do you expect me to invest AI technology in Kenya? Right? It's impossible. And something, if you go outside, you see nothing but, I don't know about all. I know there's some very flashy, very nice shopping mall outside of downtown area. But if you stay in downtown area, you see nothing but poverty. Poverty.
Okay. All right. Now, the description that you're giving to us, right, with respect to Kenya, right? Is it
Yes.
something that is widespread across the whole African continent, or it is just
I
unique to Kenya?
cannot speak for whole Africa, but through some country that I passed through, for example, Sierra Leone, right? Sierra Leone is the same thing. Is it concentrate in the capital, right? About 8 million in that area, and for $8 million, they only have like maybe 175, or I know exactly, of power, of megawatt power offshore by some Turkey company who supply power to Sierra Leone. But the president have planned to build a bridge from the downtown to the airport across the bay, for example. And usually in the capital, you see nothing but trash. Nobody clean up anything like that. Say, well, very easy. Why don't you just employ people, collect the trash and burn it and make energy? At least employ people. They don't have energy either. And and at that time we're talking about big plan. I don't know how can you do big plan when small plan you're not done yet. So I don't know about all. I never been in Ghana. I could tell. I could not tell. But in a certain country I've been there. I could tell that you need to have a plan. Like we go somewhere, you need to have a map. Where is your roadmap for development? And I think nowadays economic development requires first energy, right?
Okay. Before we shift to Vietnam, how Vietnam was able
Right.
to industrialize, right? Let me ask you a
Yes.
question, right? If you look at Western countries, they were
Mm.
developed before they became democracy, right? If you look at the United States, the United
Yeah.
States was basically a little bit developed before it
Right.
became democracy. In the case of Vietnam that we are talking about, Vietnam
Mm.
is still a communist what country, right? So
Yes.
it means that its leaders are able to do what they want, right, in terms of development, because since it is community, it's able to do certain things compared to African countries where democracy, where the people are putting pressure on the state to deliver, and the state does not have the capacity to do that. So are we getting it wrong that we should have focused on development first before becoming democratic, or it should be democracy before developing? Taking into consideration that when you have democracy, there is pressure on government to deliver certain things, and the states are not capable of doing it. So are we wrong? Because if you look at China, China also follow the same route, development first.
I that is for me. People say there's a different. United States, we don't have communists, but we are democracy, and but even United States, we have this federal government. We lead all the state with policy, with plan, right? But we allow people locally to develop. For example, state of California have their own development plan, different than New York, different. But still, we all working within the framework of the federal government, right?
Right.
Under Biden is different, under Donald Trump is different, but it's still we need to have a plan. And usually, United States, we say, oh, there is a difference between Trump and Biden. I don't think it's any different. Only different in the mouth. Maybe President Trump is more aggressive and talk more than Biden, but the policy is planned by the federal government.
All right. So you have served in Reagan's government. You served in Bush one government. Up to now,
Right.
what do you think has changed in terms of U.S. foreign policy towards Africa? Do you see any change at all?
I don't see any change. I don't see any change between Biden, Ronald Reagan, or Donald Trump. The only difference is they talk different, but it's the same thing. Believe me, right? I don't see Donald Trump can overnight change anything. Actually, a lot of things Donald Trump doing right now is leftover from Biden. Yeah, the first years that he's in business, he still inherit the policy from Biden anyway. But publicly, he can say anything he wants, right? But United States foreign policy never changed. That's what we have credit when we sign an agreement with people. That is gold. We don't change that.
Okay. All right. So now let's get into Vietnam, right? Now,
Yes.
I have an article which was written by Frederick Newman Foundation, Vietnam's
Yes.
Journey to Industrialization, the US Connection. I'm going to give you some figures, right?
Yes.
It say what? The result of Vietnam's economy in the first 4 months of 2024 shows that its position is more positive than previous prediction. Gross domestic product increased by 5.566% in the first quarter. Expectations for 2024 onward are 6 to 6.5%. All three pillars of the Vietnamese economy, investment, trade, and consumption, have shown a strong upward trend. Then it talks about foreign direct investment. So foreign direct investment totaled 6.28 billion, an increase of 7.4%. It is particularly noteworthy that 80% of registered FDI is concentrated in localities with excellent infrastructure, qualified human resources, and local administrations dedicated to streamline investment, promotion. Improvements are also evident in the quality of FDI, which includes high-tech products, environmental protection, especially in the industrial and manufacturing sector, which account for 78.5% of FDI. Vietnam also have positive trade balance of 8.4 billion in the first 4 months of 2024, which can be broken down into exports of, so they give some figures. Right. Now, what I want to know from you, what is it that Vietnam did from 1986, right, up to now? What did they do for them to embark into this industrialization project?
Well, like I just said, Vietnam have a plan of development. They invest in infrastructure in order to attract investment, and we provide the foreign investor with a lot of incentive to invest in Vietnam, right? And we focus in vocational training. We provide them with a healthy young workforce that help the investor to be successful in Vietnam. You know, in the 1986, the I know that prime minister, the first prime minister of Vietnam, he's a very much open mind communist at that time. He's I always call him he's in my uncle's age, but always say, oh, okay, we're brother, no problem. And he has some idea that even his peer, because the communists usually they make joint, uh, uh, you know, uh, decision, but he by himself decided no, we need to build a transmission line from the north to the south to accommodate the foreign investment in the south at that time. Cost of Vietnam a lot of money, but he said, well, if you don't do that, then who want to invest in Vietnam? Against his peer, against other member of the Politburo. He go ahead doing it. Somebody have to have a vision to do that, and not only the vision, but have the courage to make a decision to bring that 500 kilovolt transmission line, because Vietnam had north and south. So in the south is the hub of commercial, in the north the political, but they have more energy of hydro energy in the north at that time. Vietnam very poor. So in order to transfer the power from the north to the south, they built a 100, 1,500 kilometer uh, transmission line to bring in electricity from the north to the south to
All right.
accommodate
So,
that.
as you said, right, Vietnam receives a lot of FDI, mostly coming from the
Yes.
United States. Isn't it as a result of
No,
Vietnam?
I disagree with that. The stop. They not mostly come from the United States. No,
Okay, but
actually,
let me make a point. We have
yes,
some investment coming from the United States. Isn't it
right.
also as a result of Vietnam geostrategic what relations with the U.S. in terms of trying to counter what in China's Indo-Pacific aggression? That is why you see a lot of investment going over there to build Vietnam. Wouldn't you take that also into consideration?
Yes, that is only recently, but since 1986 until recently, Vietnam is not depend on United States for FDI. Actually, FDI from United States is very small until now. Most the major investment FDI in Vietnam right now to this stage is from Korea, Japan, Singapore, and EU, not from United States.
Yeah, but all the countries that you just mentioned, they are aligned to the United States, right?
Yeah, well, of course they are lying United States. Of course, nowadays we live in a global economy. You know, the Korean produce. You know, like all the phone here, all the Samsung phone is made. I can say 100% of Samsung phone that you're using right now is made in Vietnam.
Correct.
So of course, everything produced in Vietnam by Korean usually go to the biggest market in the world in the United States. But it cannot say that it's because of alliance with the United States. You know,
Yeah, but
Vietnam that is
what I'm
just
trying to do,
coincidence.
what I'm trying to say over here is that Vietnam has a geostrategic importance to the West, right? Let's look at Kenya. Let's take only Kenya. Kenya is of no strategic importance to the United States. So Kenya historically hasn't received a lot of FDI compared to what Vietnam is receiving. So wouldn't that also contribute to the kind of disparities in development?
Can you repeat the question? I don't understand the
I'm
question.
saying that Vietnam, because of the Indo-Pacific rivalry over there,
Yes,
is of strategic importance to the Western nations. I'm talking about
right.
the European Union, Japan, South Korea, and the US. So, because of their geostrategic importance, they tend to have a lot of foreign direct investment into that country to strengthen that country, even though it is a communist country. But if you are comparing it to a country like Kenya, Kenya is not of any geostrategic importance, right, to these Western countries. So that could be the reason why they are not able to attract the foreign direct investment that they get.
That I completely disagree or is untrue. You know, in a current situation, for example, United States pay attention to Vietnam. United States choose Vietnam as a strategic partner because of the conflict at the South China Sea. But Vietnam, yes, you say it benefit for it, but Vietnam actually doesn't want it because we want to be independent. Vietnam, if you look at the history of Vietnam, Vietnam is the only country in the world who lived next to China, right, and never ever defeated by China, right? The reason that we still have South China, Indochina, and Thailand, all that, they're still independent from China because of Vietnam, right? The reason China cannot invade further south because of Vietnam, not because anything, but Vietnam know how to deal with it peacefully. Because if you look at the history of Vietnam, we're fighting with the Chinese for thousands and thousands of years. But anytime we defeat them, we always come back and say, okay, I'm sorry. I had to beat you up, but I still want to be your good friend. I'm still your younger brother. See, that's how Vietnam survived. You know, even right now, Vietnam always in the balance between China and Vietnam. Vietnam cannot just take side with the United States or take side with China. We have to be independent. And that is, to me, is a very good policy. And everything Vietnam do is independent. It not relate. People think that, oh, because of United States. No, Vietnam don't need that. That they sign a strategic partnership with the U.S. doesn't mean that we have to take side with the United States.
All right. So before we proceed further to the energy sector, right now,
Yes.
I'm in academia, so there's a couple of things I can say. We have
Yes.
those we call the core countries, the periphery and the semi-periphery. Those countries that are
Right.
supposed to supply raw materials, mostly coming from
Right.
from the African continent. Then those who are supposed to do the manufacturing, right? That is coming from mostly East Africa, or East Asia, of which
Right.
Vietnam, Cambodia, and all those people are involved over there. Then we have the advanced countries, which mostly deal with ideas and industrialization. So isn't that also keeping Africa, in that case, what? Kenya in that fix? That Kenya is supposed to provide the raw materials. Because if you observe, most of the raw materials are taken from the African continent and brought to the West, and that is where they are processed. Right. So it seems like there's a system that has been set up. And the system is like, you those in Africa, you have to stay in your lane. Just produce the raw materials. We are not going to share our technology with you, right? Just produce what you are producing in natural resources or raw materials or critical mineral resources, and we take it to the West to process it. So isn't that also something that is against African countries, the way the
Well,
system is structured?
that is you just say exactly what I feel too. That's what the African have to decide what they have to do, because it doesn't make sense at all. you know all the mineral, all the natural resources in Africa, and we sell very cheap, dirt cheap, like iron ore from from Sierra Leone, for example. Right? They have concession, mostly Chinese, uh, European, India mainly, and they got it like concession, and they got it dirt cheap. All they need to is to pay to the politician, right? And then when Sierra Leone need to buy steel, they have to pay, premium price. That doesn't make sense to you? I don't think so. If I'm an African country, I will not do that. I'm going to say, look, I need investment. I'm going to produce raw steel here. If you want to buy my raw material, then you have to pay the price, because I need to investment here. Instead, they just do it easy way. Just pay me a concession, and then you do anything you want,
All right.
right?
So
And
before I
with
continue,
all
go
the
ahead.
natural resources, same thing, because your natural resource is your asset. Why don't you take that as collateral and build your own steel plant in Africa? For example, I know Kenya don't have a lot of naturals compared to other Western countries, but they could be the center of processing all those material, and do as a capital of investment in East Africa. You have to make yourself important. Nobody can help you. You expect Donald Trump to help you? No, Donald Trump want to take advantage of you, right?
Okay.
So you
You,
want to
you,
help,
you,
and you have to do it yourself.
now
And
you
I
mentioned
tell them,
processing.
I say, I can do that. I can bring Vietnam lesson to you and learn how to do it yourself.
Okay, you mentioned processing, right? We'll come to that. Now, for now, I want to find out whether most of our observers or the participants, they have any question before we go to the processing and the energy aspect. Do you have any questions you want to ask our special guest for today?
I think right now my only question is, do you have a will to do it? Because there are many example, many things that nowadays it doesn't take long time to figure out what you should do, because all the lesson, all the example, all the technology is available, just a phone call away. Why don't you do it?
Right.
Just a phone call away.
Yeah, let's listen. Let's see whether any of our listeners has any question to ask before we go to the next segment.
Yes.
Do you have any question? Anybody has a question to ask before we proceed to the next segment? All right, so let me come back to you. You mentioned processing. So we have Africa has a lot of critical mineral resources that is needed in the West, and you are making the argument that they should be processed. Right now, in order for you to process, you have to be industrialized. Right,
Yes.
and Africa does not have that industrial base. So how do we proceed going forward? Because industrial base, in order for you to industrialize, you have to have a what? A stable energy system, right? We don't have the capital, right, to do this industrialization. So, in your opinion, what did what Vietnam do that Africa can learn or Africa can copy directly?
Well, when Vietnam in 1986, Vietnam not only like in a worse situation than Kenya, it was embargoed by United States, right? We don't have help from the United States. We was embargoed by them, right? But Vietnam have to do what Vietnam have to do to survive. Like I just said, I was in Africa. One thing very funny in Nairobi, when you order a drink, they never give you ice. Give me a Coca-Cola. They give you free Coca-Cola without ice, right? I wonder what's wrong. It's very hot, no ice. because they don't even make it their own ice. And you go outside on the market, people selling food, meat, no, no ice. How can you keep it fresh? So I just told some local politicians, first thing you have young people make an ice maker machine, or at least a factory. You can sell big chunk of ice and sell to people, right? So they can uh, live better than they when they sell food, it could preserve food and everything. If for example, it doesn't cost anything, and if you want to do it, all you need is to hire an engineer. You can build that very easily. You have all technology. Ice, they don't have it, and they don't think that it's necessary. But but bottom line is the people need it. Don't talk about, right now we talk a lot of being about big things. And nowadays, for example, energy, right? Easy. Nowadays with solar, with renewable energy, it's so cheap. In Vietnam, after the government in 2020, 2022, right? No, even before that, 2018, the government just said, look, we're going to pay 9.35 cents per kilowatt for solar energy. Within 2 years, Vietnam built 20 gigawatt of solar by private. That's how people motivated, right? That's government say policy. Okay, the fee is we give you 12 months. Whoever submit the plan and do it, we pay you instead of 6 cents. Now we pay you 9.35 cents per kilowatt. And immediately they have 200 projects. Within 12 months, they build it 20 gigawatt. And nowadays, that day, 2018, the price of solar cell very expensive. That it like 600,000 per megawatt. Now even half, less than half. It's very easy. That's why I told a lot of people who contact me, say, you should do microgrid or mini grid, whatever it is, because right now, before the government spending $1 billion to build a grid or transmission line, they don't have it. Maybe 30, 40 billion dollars to cover it. Your own community, build your own community. Just solar, 10 kilowatt,
No,
10
but
megawatt.
you just mentioned 30, 10, $20 billion, right? These are capital investments which African countries do not have. They don't have these huge capital. They have to come to the World Bank, the IMF, go into the international market, bond market to borrow this money. And this money are at high interest rates. So they get themselves caught up in the debt trap. Right? So it seems like Africa tends to have a very difficult situation compared to what we have in Vietnam.
Well, Vietnam just all the project in Vietnam is done not by government, by private investment, by the Vietnamese themselves, because it's just profit motivated, right? They the one who borrow. Before you go to the World Bank, maybe you should borrow your friend and family first, and then you go to the World Bank. You show to the World Bank, hey, I do 10 kilowatt. He's very successful. Why don't you? And there are a lot of country. There are a lot of venture capitalists willing to do it, but you have to demonstrate that you really intend to do it. But right now it's hard because I'm telling you, that's what I read the article, because I said it's not because they don't have it. It's difficult to do it. Right now, you go to Africa. I don't want to mention it, but very difficult. You know, the they say it, but they always have kickback. They all like that kind of thing. People don't feel safe to invest in in Africa right now. If you told them it's very safe here, we protect you no matter what, people will invest. The problem right now, why you cannot get any money, and it costs you more money. Like the way I look at it right now, uh, Kenya rating is B minus, right? Because you're high risk. I can sign a deal with Ruto tomorrow, but then the next day he no longer there, and my deal is what? Is zero, right? So that's a problem. The problem is you want the World Bank, if the World Bank definitely want to see if the money they lend to you, you're going to use for the good purpose. Otherwise, that's why they don't want to give you. But if you say, look, we're serious about it. We have our guarantee. We got like what 50 million people to guarantee you. We got resource. We got all that. And then of course it depends. It's just a credit worthiness, right?
Okay, but you have a lot of networks because of your business background. So when you meet some of these African leaders, right? What sort of conversation do you have with them based on what you have seen? Let's look at the case of Kenya, because after you wrote that article, right, you did a postscript where you were saying that it's not like you are trying to uh, create a bad image about the cabinet minister, but you are being constructive. So why that postscript? Why did you do that if you are being very constructive about what is happening on the African continent?
No, the thing is,
Because
when
you are being objective. You are being very objective.
I think we're objective, but the thing is, uh, yeah, when I wrote that thing, some people who close to Mudavadi called me and asked me to take that thing off. When only about 50,000 people read that article, and they call me up and say, "Look, you need to take it down." I said, "Why?" Because this is just my observation. But then they said, "Well, but you have a picture of Mudavadi with you, right?" So that's why the postscript is. But when I honestly, I almost wanted to take it down too. But after the conversation, I go back to the article. It's go up to 150,000 people. And so that's why I call them up. I say, no, I can't, because if I do that, then I will betray the people of Africa. I cannot do that. But I can write a postscript for you. This is not a personal criticism to Mudavadi, but just a observation. But I cannot take it down. That's the reason what the postscript is.
All right, let's get back to that. If you observe,
And
most
right
African
now, a lot of them call me and kind of give me some kind of protest or thing, but I don't care because you know one thing is I'm American, so I have to stay true to my American principle. You know.
All right, so let me, since you brought the issue about American, right? American companies who go to invest in African countries have to be aware of the State Department Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, that they don't have to
Mm.
give bribes and kickbacks to African countries. So you see that most African countries are moving towards the east. They are moving towards China because the Chinese are ready to play ball. Now the Trump administration come in and they have suspended, right, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So that means they are going to play the game of the Chinese so as to enable what American companies to also have access to the critical mineral resources on the African continent. So it has now become like a game where Africa is more or less on the chessboard, that everybody, all the powers, middle power, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, all of them are trying to have a piece of the cake, because it never used to be like that before. But now Trump has suspended the FCPA. How does that augur well for American companies now?
I don't. I think President Trump says something. He can say anything he want to, but to stop corruption in Africa or even Vietnam is ridiculous. Sometimes you have to understand that corruption is part of the business too. Without corruption, nothing gonna move, right? But, when the civil servant or the government employee get paid very low, they got subsidized, their income with some kind of bonus. In Vietnam, even right now today, they still have that kind of thing, but at least they have a plan, and they is under control. They have corruption everywhere. The way I see it, you travel around the world, you see corruption. But in Kenya is or I cannot say in Africa. I don't know all African country, but in Kenya is just more than that. The corruption is not to make it moving, but it more like, okay, also I take the money and that's it. I don't really care about what good for Kenya, what good for the country. That's a different. In Vietnam, you want me to sign it, you pay me, but I will not just do it just for myself. I still have to look at, because the law in Vietnam is pretty strict. In the beginning, it now not anymore, but in the beginning of the opening of Vietnam, if you take bribe more than 50, okay, let's say more than uh, $50, you can get shot.
Okay.
You know, so but nowadays uh, that law is not apply anymore because we don't need it anymore. But Vietnam right now, the government right now, they try to kind of streamline the government now. They put several ministry in one, so easy, less people, and then they hopefully to pay people more, and only they select more people and more qualified people than just people to being there just for being there. And I think uh, Kenya actually, when you say about dictatorship or one party system compared to democratic, I think I'm in politics, and I tell you it's no different. In United States, we claim that we have a free democratic election. Actually, we don't. We only have two choice: either Republican or Democrat. We don't have a choice, right? And you cannot say that we're completely free, but at least the government listen, and the people have a, a, a power to tell the government what to do, right? Uh, but I don't think that happened in Kenya, right? I don't think it's happened effectively in Vietnam either. But
All right.
but in United States,
Okay, in your article, you talk about legal instability and corruption, and you just mentioned
right,
corruption again. We all of us on the program can agree that African countries are corrupt, and there's corruption everywhere. But in the case of Africa, it's a development issue because corruption deprives the people of the development that they are supposed to get. But the question is, who benefits from corruption in Africa? It is the West. It's the Western countries that benefit from corruption in Africa because most of these resources that are this corrupt money, right, don't stay in Africa. They move to the West. So the West has become a safe haven for corruption. And yet still it's the same West who complains back that African is corrupt. Yeah, we are African leaders are corrupt, but it's the Western countries that are the beneficiaries of the corruption. So how do you navigate this situation calling the people
I,
corrupt? But meanwhile, you are the what? The beneficiaries of corruption.
did I mention to you? I'm not criticizing, but I just told you corruption is a fact of life in Africa or Vietnam, and I'm not criticize that, right? I didn't say anything about it. And actually, corruption, like you said exactly, corruption only good for the West, for bad people in the West, right? They take advantage of your division, your corruption, your selfishness, everything else. They take advantage of it, right? It's not good for the African people, of course, but 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 then but the end result is what happened? Nothing done, nothing done at all. The West take advantage of Africa because the the division among African. Everything. There are a lot of cases I can say that, but I don't want to mention it because it involved me. So more like personal, I don't want to do it. But I think
No,
a
I
lot of
can give I can give you examples. We see what is happening in Sudan.
a
See what
lot
is
of
happening in
good
South
case.
South
Okay,
Sudan,
say it. Yeah,
DR Congo, Burkina Faso, Mali. I can give you all those examples, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. And those people, I you know I don't know what to say. You if you are the president of a country, right? Of course, even Donald Trump enriched himself too as the president of the United States. So, but at least he do something for the country. The way I see it, and there's a law, the Constitution to control that. I don't know about that in Africa. I'm sure that they have constitution in Kenya. They're all that, but how it's applied, I don't know. I cannot tell. But because I don't live there, I don't know. But definitely, there's something is not right because nothing seemed to be able to do anything in Kenya. I talked to a lot of Kenyans and say, "Oh no, the good Kenyan. I mean, a lot of people say don't invest there because you can't do. You know, you're going to be in a trap of them. You know, it's true because as an investor, I definitely would not come to a country to invest under that kind of condition. Is there's no clear definition. You invest in there, maybe you have a friend of this governor or with this prime minister, and then the next election he's no longer there, and you're going to be victim of the next guy. No, is that impossible? Impossible to invest in that way, and 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 for example, I just said briefly on housing, for example, right? Housing is the same thing. They they don't care if we build a good house or bad house. All they care about is you should build a house. Pay me, build a house. But then if with so little money we have to pay off people, and then what happens if one day the house just collapse, like the way the Chinese do in Thailand? You see, in in the whole Bangkok, we have an earthquake, no building is collapsed except the building built by the Chinese to the government, of Bangkok, right? They contract the Chinese because of bribery. I don't know, and nobody know that until the earthquake. And the whole Bangkok, only one building collapsed is built by the Chinese. Well, don't blame the Chinese. The Chinese built very nice building in China. The reason they build a bad building and collapse because corruption in Thailand. You see, corruption in the government of Thailand. They pay off the government in Bangkok. Maybe that's the reason why, in order for the Chinese to get a contract and build it, that's what the result at the end. That's what we cannot do that. And I told a lot of people, I said, no, we can't do it. If we do, the public housing, we require like 60,000 shilling per square meter instead of 30,000 or 50,000, because that way is unsafe. And also, there are a lot of things we think that it's very difficult because you need to have infrastructure, you have road, and everything else. Because if you don't do that, you create a lot of problem. Right now, the president say they build 500,000 units of housing for the people of Kenya. The first question is where's electricity for that 500,000 unit?
Okay, so that's the question I want to ask you. That Africa can, let's use Kenya as a case study, right? Find themselves in a catch-22 situation, right?
Yeah.
They are trying to build houses, right? But meanwhile, the electricity is not there.
Yeah.
Right? The infrastructure is not there, right? So it's like it's a catch-22. You don't have the resources, so it's very difficult for the government to actually do what it's supposed to do. And there's a lot of pressure on the government to deliver. And because there's a lot of pressure for the government to deliver,
that pressure comes from the government itself. Why you have a plan like that? You need to have a plan, a master plan. Okay, in order for me to do this, I need to have A, B, C, D in order to get this. You don't have to rush into do something that doesn't make sense, right? That because the people, I know people in Kenya need housing. They need everything. They need housing. They need food. They need employment. They need clean water. They need electricity. So you have to set up your priority. You cannot promise the world when you don't have the resource to do that. You have to, like you say, you have a plan. You have to set a priority to do that. For example, you say okay, I want to build a steel plant in Sierra Leone, and you ask me how do you do it? You have no money, and the World Bank don't want to give you the money. Then you tell the World Bank, you say, look, or the investor, or the people who benefit from you. You tell all the people who get concession from iron ore, and they say, look, you got to put up the collateral for me, so I have to build the thing. If you don't, I kick you out, right? So you can build a steel plant there, right? Okay, you want me to give a concession? Then you put up the collateral for me. I could get it and I build my steel plant. Maybe now, but in the next 10 years, I sell my steel. I don't need to sell iron ore, right? There's a lot of ways to do it. I couldn't tell you. I'm not the president, but with the president, you got a lot of tools to work with. I just say example, right? They got the Chinese, even Tony Blair have some business in iron ore. The way I look at the list, And you say, look, you benefit from me, right? But at least you need to help me. You need to put up collateral for me. You need to help me to build a steel plant because we cannot completely depend on you forever, right?
Why would you think that I would do it if I'm exploiting you to my advantage? Why should I come and help you for you to become independent of me?
So what? Then when I kick you out, I don't give you concession anymore. You or take advantage of me. I find another country, another company to do it for me.
But you know right? That has contributed to a lot of assassination on the African continent, where you have leaders who tend to revolt against the Western countries, and they've been assassinated because of this revolution.
No, we don't need to do that either. We don't need to be like Gaddafi or something. That is, business is supposed to be business. It not antagonize your enemy. That's a problem with Gaddafi and all that. I know I never say anything wrong with Gaddafi, but he antagonized the United States. Why should Vietnam? We don't want to do that either. We want to be neutralized. We don't. Donald Trump. Remember Donald Trump signed a deal that the leader of China come to Vietnam, right? And remind us, we are friends. Yeah, we are still friends, but I also friend with United States too. Whoever nice with me, I work with them, right? But you don't need to antagonize. You don't need to say, you are colonialism or you imperialist or whatever it is. There's no such thing anymore. That's the past. The future is only one color, economic development, green dollar. That's what it is, right? And what you need, what is your priority in Kenya right now? The Kenya right now is energy, right? You need to have energy because right now, when you talk to investor to invest in Kenya right now, the first question is where your electricity? Who invests in it, right? So that maybe when you go to the World Bank, that's what you tell the World Bank. If I, President Kenya, say, look, I want to build, to attract FDI to Kenya, but I need electricity. You need to help me. You got to give me, and you talk to other country, other investor, not only country, but a lot of private investor. If they make sense, they will invest it. But you have to guarantee that this is for real, not for Ruto, not for any particular party, but it's for Kenya. Of course, people will do it, right? Because how? Because you got the resource. Like in my community, right, in Vietnamese community here in the United States, when the judge want to build a just of $40 million, right? The judge doesn't have money. And all the priest say, okay, all the congregation, when you go to the bank, you sign your guarantee with the bank that you will pay the debt. So the bank can loan the money to the church so the church can be built. Not right away, you just sign your guarantee.
All right. One of our participants from South Africa, Dr. Nkomo, he wants to ask a question, right? Dr. Nkomo, go ahead.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the speech. It's a few comments and then maybe it's not many questions. It's towards the end. Well, for me, it's 3 minutes after 12, so it's already past midnight for me. So,
yes,
no, it's just a few lessons that I could take, but and comments. The first one that I liked was the 24-hour business. That obviously most of our towns is true. Usually around 9 p.m., like Mr. Chow has said, that they go to sleep. Yes, it's true. I think that's one lesson that one can take to heart and think about it. The other one, perhaps saying that perhaps what we need to be looking at as well is maybe focusing on the vocational side, so that from the training point of view, that at least we focus on that. But the one that Dr. Akwe also brought in, which is important, I know we never followed it quite strenuously, it's about investments. That when we talk investments and developments, that somehow it's not or it's difficult to not juxtapose and bring democracy, that the very same democracy, it looks like, stifles and slows things down. In most of the countries, it did allude to it a bit, to say where is no democracy, there's speed in terms of development, because the leader can be able to move at speed. Happens to China, and I would believe even in Vietnam. That was helpful in that when you are not yet a democracy, you can move faster than democracy, which will stifle you and slows things down in terms of the development per se. The other part is what you mentioned, to say one should be able, I'll use just your words loosely, of saying one has to, play ball, meaning that you don't have to antagonize. You use the Gaddafi one. That unfortunately, when you have to be aggressive in moving things in your country, you will find yourself antagonizing the very forces which don't want you to develop. France, in most of the French-speaking countries, is interfering and making sure that if you try to develop, you're dead. You're dead. The very same assassinations that you will end up playing ball and not developing because you are afraid. Because you try to be aggressive, you try to be creative and move your country and find yourself that you are in the firing line. That comes through as well. That sometimes is not helpful is interference. We know now, Trump talked to the US aid, that US aid was doing good, sponsoring these other entities, but on the other side, the other hand of the same US aid is funding the rebels, is funding the terrorists, is funding, making sure that the countries are not governable. One hand, they are funding the NGOs to do good. The other hand is destroying, which is interference, to say, as much as it's all good, how can 50 countries in Africa, not even one, moving at speed? It tells us that maybe the 50, there is some interference that we may have to talk about. That's what I'm saying. It's not a question, it's comment based on what you have said and based on our experiences broadly and based on what Dr. Ekwe has brought in as well. Thanks. That's my contribution.
Yeah,
I love your reaction to that. Yeah.
I love the last comment about the influence of France in Africa. Vietnam was under the influence of France in the last century, and we finally fight the French for independence, right? And I was French educated. I studied in Paris, so I understand the French politics as well as the French behavior. French still live in the past too. French right now, of course, in the last century, right? The two countries like British and France and Portuguese, all that they colonized Africa, Vietnam, and Asia. French colonized Tunisia, Algeria, West Africa, all that. Of course, they want to keep what they have because right now, French, they have nothing, right? France become irrelevant for United States. France nothing. France don't have it doesn't count. They still think they are counting, right? Because of what left over of the past. But right now, France is not a force to be reckoned with. I don't think so. French try to keep what they don't have anymore, right? Like for example, Vietnam. I asked you the same question. What happened? Vietnam just exactly like you, like Africa. We fight them, but we still a good friend with them. It's how you I mean, it's like I say, it's how you, for example, right now, to counter the French, work with the United States, work with Vietnam. Vietnam can that's my idea. What I want to bring Vietnam to Africa, right? To counter whatever it is, the French can say, okay, cannot do, okay, but the Vietnamese can do cheaper.
Yeah, but
right?
The point is that in the case of Vietnam, it has geostrategic importance, right? But
that's not true. That is another myth. Actually, Kenya is more strategic important to do in East Africa. If you make yourself that way, right? You have port. You are very, very, very highly educated. You have a younger workforce. You got everything, in your benefit, right? If you're next to country like Somalia, Sudan, or all that. So actually, United States need you to neutralize those guys. You make an example out of that, right? I think the way I see Kenya is more important than Vietnam in Africa, right? So that I can understand that. I can understand why the French government still want intervene with African politics. They divide you. They. But then we have to fight back. But fight back here doesn't mean you have to use military or anything like that. You balance it. You bring in. You don't stick with French. You work with Korean. You work with China. You work with Vietnam, and you have a lot of choice. And when the Vietnamese in Africa, I don't think the French can tell them what to do.
Yeah, let me just remind you, there was a recent article written by John Perkins. John Perkins wrote this book, The Economic Hitman, right? And he was making the argument that the kind of resistance that is coming from Africa in terms of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso could lead to more assassinations on the African continent. He's making the argument that a lot of African leaders, especially those coming from the French-speaking countries, if they keep pushing back on the French, that would lead to a lot of assassinations on the African continent. And we saw that in the 80s and the 60s, where Patrice Lumumba in DR Congo, Thomas Sankara. So it seems like that is what he is speculating, that if we keep pushing back the French, we are going to see a cycle of assassinations on the African continent.
Yeah. I agree. I do not deny that fact. There are a lot of assassination, a lot of coup because of backed by foreign force, right, against you. But that's why I said, you need to create alliance. You need to have alliance. For example, if you, that's how successful is. You should make alliance with many other countries besides France and United States. Nowadays the war is completely different now. Asia could be a force to be reckoned with. Even the United States have to pay attention to it, right? If the Vietnamese, you learn a lesson, you copy what Vietnam do, and the Vietnamese invest in, then the French probably will not be able to do that.
So before I give you the final word, right? Going forward, listening to what happened in Kenya and talking to your insiders over there, what do you think Africa as a whole should do going forward to be able to change things over there?
Yeah, Africa is like the article said. You have the people, you got the resource, you got everything. All you need is the will. I cannot say how I can do it because it's up to the African determination to decide how they want to do it. But they have everything in place. All they don't have is the will to do it. I mean, and it's very sensitive to say anything, criticize any government because it's not my position to criticize anyone. But I just
but we've seen what he just said. We've seen that.
I just point out that nothing that a lot of questions say, oh, how do you have money to do it? I just tell you, you got a lot of collateral, you got a lot of resource, right? And your biggest collateral is your people. You got 1 billion people. It's a big market, right? And people, for example, right now you want me to invest in energy. I will do it tomorrow with you, right? Only one condition. Okay, how much you pay me? I'm not going to do charity here, right? Okay, you give me the incentive to invest in Africa, to tell me how much you pay per kilowatt. I will invest myself. You don't need to go to the World Bank. I will go to the World Bank myself, right? I will bill you All I want to do is give me a PPA, power purchase agreement. How much you pay me for 10 years? After 10 years, I give that land to you too.
Right.
I got my return money, I give it to you. That kind of thing. That is a very simple answer, right? Incentive to do it, and by invest in massive solar power, solar farm. Of course, you employ local people, and with electricity, and then the local people have electricity, have light, have and then they're starting farming, they're starting producing thing. Right now, they can't do it because they have no resource with it.
And
Right?
one of our participants just said you mentioned lack of a long-term plan, because most of the politicians leaders always have short-term, because they are in there to gather as much as they can, so they don't want to have that long-term vision for the country, right? So it's all about what you can get in the short term. So he's making a comment that you are right about that. How do we change that?
Well, I look at the case of Kenya, for example. The population from 18 to 34 it comprised like 60% of the country. Right now, they need to pick the right leader. They have to be able. Somebody had to motivate them to register, and not only register, but had to show up at the poll on the voting day. Right? Select your own people. And it's a people power. If the politician doesn't do what you want to do, then select another one. You need a good leader, because right now, I mean, a lot of people can vocally say a lot of things, but at the end, why the wrong leader got elected? Because they didn't vote.
Let me quote Patrice Lumumba, right? He's a Kenyan lawyer. He makes the argument that on the African continent, those who have ideas don't have power, and those who have power don't have ideas. Would you subscribe
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah, that exactly. That exactly. Not only in Africa, in Vietnam, in the old days, is the same thing. They say, I have a joke about that too. Somebody told the Vietnamese, who told to the Cambodian about how smart the Vietnamese is, and how stupid is the Cambodian is. And the Prince Sihanouk told the Vietnamese, say, it's true. Vietnamese people are very smart. But the problem is, in Vietnam, in the old day, right, is, the guy who control Vietnam is 1%. 99% smart people is not control Vietnam. In my country, 100% is stupid, but the smart guy is the control of Cambodia, me. Right? So the point is, you need to elect in how smart you are, but the power had to be controlled by the people, by selective. I know for sure that a lot of people protest, right? They call Generation Z, whatever it is. But
Yeah,
I
Kenya.
guarantee you, none of them gonna at the election day they did not vote, because they don't think they voted count. But somebody had to motivate that. Pick the right one, the one that you don't need the smart guy. You need a guy a good guy. Smart guy, you can hire, you can you don't need a PhD to be president. You need a president with a heart, right? And that president will employ 1,000 PhD for him. Listen to that. Ronald Reagan is not a smart guy, but he's a good guy. And he have a lot of good people working for him. So that exactly, you don't need a PhD. I keep telling a lot of, not only Africa, a lot of Vietnamese, who care about PhD? You need is a person, a leader is the one sometimes with a heart, and know how to listen to the right thing. That's what you need.
Right. So let me follow up. Right. If those of us who are here, right, have an idea about the way government works. So if the president of Sierra Leone calls you today, Mr. Chow, can you bring some investors to come and invest in the energy sector in Sierra Leone? What will you say to him?
Yes, I just told you already. Yes, the Vietnamese are anxious to invest in Kenya, as long as the condition for investment is right. For example, I always say, I keep telling people in Kenya, just give me a PPA, I will invest it. You don't need to go to the World Bank. We will go to the World Bank. We got the private equity people from Vietnam to invest in the country. As long as the bottom line is they invest, they make money, and the investment is secure. That's all.
Right. Thank you.
Not
Anybody
only in
else?
that, in many areas,
Okay.
in cement, in steel plant, all that. Because nowadays it's not about that is another thing people don't understand it. Maybe out of date. It's not the equipment. Equipment doesn't mean anything, right? You can get equipment, you get a plant easily. The market. The Vietnamese not they will invest in Kenya not about what because they want to have the market in Kenya or in Africa. Vietnamese need that market if they want to grow, they want to expand it. Of course, it's the market, not yeah, easy. The investment
Yeah. Okay.
physically is very easy.
Anybody has any question so that we can wrap it up? It's almost an hour, 30 minutes. Anybody has any question for our guest?
Uh, Greetings. I would like to make a comment if I couldn't raise my
Yes, sir.
hand. I very much appreciate your thoughts, especially the observation that there's an absence of a development plan, a master plan on which development ought to be built. And that is not an issue. You'll find that issue across multiple African countries. And since the 1990s, when people came to power, we were told that we got to go toward democracy first. We have to build democratic nations. And, we got caught in between those 5 years. I get elected and then I have to make sure I show something within 5 years so I can get reelected again. And that, believe me, is for cases where it works. In some other instances, even during those 5 years, they're not going to do anything to get reelected based on their performance because there is absolutely no master plan on which, I come to power, I serve 2 terms, and I leave. Whoever comes next will build on that master plan. Literally, we don't even have a solid master plan for building our cities. So when someone comes, it's a perpetual um, starting over and over and over and over. That is absolutely a reality that you can find across all of Africa, most of Africa. Of course, we have regional bodies that have a 2060 development plan, the African Union 2063 plan, but all of that is not working because there is no correlation between the political will and the development plan. And who is to blame for that? Of course, we can blame our leaders, but Africa is also Africa. It has always been that part of the world where everybody sort of like comes in and takes and goes. And one of the arguments that I wouldn't agree with you that much is your suggestion to not antagonize. Today, we are very much into that idea that we antagonize with anyone because the West does not have the monopoly of violence. The West does not have the monopoly of dominating the rest of the world. We have those ambitions as well. We would love to go and conquer China. We would love to go and conquer the United States. And if it takes us to antagonize the USA, if it will take us to antagonize Europe, we, this generation, we're going to do that because we're not going to we know everything. We know what is going on. We now know what it took the US to be what the US is today. We know and understand what it took China to be a superpower today. It took China discipline. We're working on that. We got to discipline ourselves. It took us a certain number of things. We know that. So today, especially in West, I feel so good coming even as Africans, I see the energy coming. We might fail, but generation will build on our failure and go toward that direction. So antagonizing, not just for the sake of antagonizing, but in a very smart way. And I think in the Sahel, we're in that dynamic we are because we have finally understood that some of the folks that are standing in front of us, until we antagonize with them, until we tell them bullshit, they're not going to let us go toward the direction where we're destined to go. So that is the only observation I have, that it might be a little bit different from what you think, or otherwise everything I totally, entirely share that. And I've been to Kenya as well multiple times. Now I'm appalled by the idea that that fake messiah cult Kenyans have been misled to believe that every development has to go through that route of selling the Kenyan culture, and that is not working. It's not working. Leaders after leaders of the new generation are coming, and they are not capable of breaking away from that because they're working within a matrix of a development that has been taught by others. There is actually a master plan. That master plan is for us to remain underdeveloped, use raw material that will continue to develop better nations and major nations. And that is what some of the youth have understood and are actually um, working to actually. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I learn a lot, and I very, very, very much appreciate the time you took to share this with Dr. Benjamin's audience. And I will go and follow you and read the article you have produced. Thank you very much.
Can I add?
Like I said, the article is on our website on the Sankofa African Review, right? But make your comment, then we'll wrap up. Yeah, go ahead.
I think what the Mr. Wedrago,
Rodrigo,
it's very true. I have no issue. Whatever he said, actually, it's very, very true. The point is, the plan. I talked to the Kenyans. They said we have plan, but we work on that plan. But the point is that, like you just said, there's no continuation. One administration ago to now, that like you asked me earlier about United States. United States, even they changed president, but the plan stay. The development plan stay, and you need to continue from one president to another, but our foreign policy stay the same. So that's what Kenya or Africa need to do, and you need to take care. Basically, you don't have to do a big plan until you have to do infrastructure, the basic plan first. The way I see it right now, and a lot of people say, "Well, we have plan, but it takes time." No, I disagree on that one. Right? Because how long do you want your people to wait? Right? When you have no water, no electricity, you're in a slum, you can't wait. It should be done yesterday, and you haven't done it yet. Right? So if that alone, nobody trusts you. You can say anything, AI, technology, all that. If I'm an outsider, I come to your country, I meet with you, you say, okay, I'm going to build a chip factory and AI. I'm going to inside and say, you bullshit me. Your people live like this. And you expect me to believe you? Right? You have no electricity. You have no economy. Your people live in slum. They have nothing to eat. And you tell me you're going to do AI technology. How can I believe you? You see? That's a problem in Africa. We talk about
basically saying that we've not done the work. The actual work has not been done. And we are focusing on the fifth industrial revolution.
All the flashy thing, all the beautiful thing. But the bottom line is, you imagine if you are the person who live in the slum, you think you can wait another year, another week, right? Somebody that is the leader with a heart. If I'm Ruto, I wouldn't say I'm going to build 500,000 units of housing, right? I don't need to. I need to say I'm going to clear all that slum. I'm going to build public facility for those guys with water, electricity, right? And you build your own house. I give you a chance to build your own house, but you have your own electricity, you have all water, right? I give you eyes, you be your own enterprise. You're selling fish, you're selling anything you want. That's what I want to do first. If I do that, then the World Bank will say, "Ah, this guy know what he's talking about." Because right now, the last time, when I attend some meeting with the U.S. ambassador in some conference in West Kenya, she talked about technology because she's from Silicon Valley. I think this is full of bullshit. This country don't need that. They need water, they need electricity. Why don't you do something for that? Right? And I heard that is not a problem in Kenya either. And then, the other guests in South Africa, I have some friends get back from South Africa. Even in South Africa, in Johannesburg, they still need water and electricity too. What's
Yeah,
wrong?
absolutely. Correct.
That can be done very quickly. Why can't you do that?
So based on what you are saying, some of our guests will reach out to you, right? I'll share your contact with them, and they'll see how best they can get in touch with you if they have access to government, and see how best you'll be able to come in and see how best you can help their various countries, right? Because the
Yes.
energy is the biggest problem on the African continent. Because without the
Right.
energy, you build the industries will not work for you to process whatever you are supposed to process. So the energy is key factor for the African countries. So we hope that we'll be able to use our contact with you to be able to network with other people in the African continent, right? So
Thank
on
you.
this note, I'll say a big thank you to you for taking time off your busy schedule, 3 hours on the West Coast and we in the East Coast. I hope this conversation will continue, right? I'll say a big thank you and, to all our participants, and we hope that we'll meet you next week again on the Sankofa African Review. So I say thank you and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And thank you to all the guests. Bye-bye.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.